Well, hello.
Hi.
It's nice to
How are you doing?
Hi. It's nice to see everybody this evening. So thank you all for joining us as we commemorate the March of the Overmountain Men and the events that took place here at Cowpens the night before they made their final approach to Kings Mountain. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Diana Bramble, and I'm the superintendent here at Cowpens National Battlefield, Kings Mountain National Military Park, 96th National Historic Site, and the Overmountain Victory National Historic Trail. So we're honored this evening to have our dedicated partner, the Overmountain Victory Trail Association, with us to present their performance of the night before Kings Mountain. I'm sure many of you are here because of them. So each year, the members of the Overmountain Victory Trail Association spend 2 weeks retracing the march of the Overmountain Men. They start essentially with the gathering at the muster grounds in Abingdon, Virginia, all the way to Kings Mountain National Military Park in Blacksburg, South Carolina. They actually start a little bit before that, but September 10th is when you guys start with some programs. But during this march, they honor the experience of these courageous patriots and provide educational programs for the communities along the route. The commemoration of the annual march is a labor of love from what I have observed. This is my second annual march now, and I can definitely tell you it's a labor of love. It's a time for camaraderie, engagement of new audiences, and fostering a sense of community. I would be remiss in not recognizing the challenges that have been with all of us for these last 2 marches. The March of 2020 was unlike any other, yet with the boldness of Overmountain Men, the Overmountain Victory Trail Association marched on, and they provided enriching educational experiences in person and virtually to thousands of participants. We had hope that this year would be more normal, and in the absence of normalcy, I'm using my air quotes again, we still found a way to charge forward. I'm incredibly thankful for this, that we're able to be here this evening to present this program to you, and for the creative and enduring efforts of the Overmountain Victory Trail Association, as well as the team here at Cowpens National Battlefield and the Overmountain Victory National Historic Trail, as they found ways to safely carry on with these events. I think it's important to remember why we commemorate significant events. Although the March of the Overmountain Men occurred 241 years ago, it has a lasting impact on our lives today. Commemoration helps to instill a sense of reverence for the people that had a profound impact here. It provides an opportunity for all of us to connect through the significance of the event and our shared history. And this is where we honor the bravery of those who gave the ultimate sacrifice for their beliefs, and where their descendants connect to their heritage. This is our nation's history, and we're grateful to be able to share it with you. So thank you. And with that, I'm going to let you guys take it away.
Hello there. We're going to talk about the Revolutionary War. And first I want to put a few things in perspective. In 1780, which is the Kings Mountain Battle, the Revolutionary War had already been going on for 5 years. It started in 1775 with the Battle of Concord and Lexington. When the British tried to disarm the Americans, they marched out all night to get to Concord to collect the arms in the arsenal. There were several thousand Brown Besses, 7 cannons, and several tons of powder and shot there. So that kind of kicked the thing off. And the 8 years of this war, the first 3 are up in New England, Massachusetts, New York, all the way some down to Virginia. But yeah, it was pretty bad. Well, in 1780, war hadn't been going too well for the Patriots or the British. Things were all boggled down up in the north. nobody was really winning significantly over the other. So the British had to do something. The governor up in North Carolina and South Carolina said, well, come down here. Most of our people are loyalists. Well, it wasn't quite true, but it helped get them to focus on something called the Southern Strategy or the Southern Campaign. So the British started focusing on coming down here, and they were successful enough in May of 1780 when they finally captured Charleston. Now there's an awful lot of worthy stuff to talk about that, but what they captured was 6,000 Patriots, the entire Southern Army, and all of their arms, all of their cannons, all of their supplies, food, wagons, everything. So the British were feeling pretty darn good about that, but they were concerned about North Carolina and South Carolina. The British kind of thought they owned the East Coast, but not the interior. Now they decided they were going to do a three-pronged approach to come up into North Carolina. The main focus of the Army was going to come up straight from Charleston through Camden to Charlotte. Now, then he sent a smaller part of the Army up the East Coast, the King's Highway from Charleston to up to Boston was that highway. So he sent one part of the Army up that way. And then he sent another one out through the western side. Now, the western side was loyalists. He wanted to recruit loyalists, and he wanted to capture patriots. So he sent a Scottish major by the name of Patrick Ferguson up with 70 men marching, 20 cavalry, and 10 wagons with drivers. And the wagons were full of the food and ammunition, and 300 captured French muskets that were captured from the Americans when they took over Charleston. So Patrick Ferguson started out with a full page of orders. The orders said, you are to immediately recruit as many loyalists as you can to the banner, and you are to recruit young unmarried men primarily. And if they had no arm, then you give them one of the Charleville, the French muskets that were captured at Charleston. If they had a horse, they could bring the horse. They had to pay their own for their own fodder and take care of the horse. But they were welcome to bring a horse. They were encouraged to bring their own firearm. And he set out with that 100 men from Charleston and managed to pick up quite a few en route. Now, when the main army comes up from Charleston, they meet General Gates and the entire Patriot army coming down to meet them. The trouble is, that didn't go well for the Patriots at all. General Gates made a large number of mistakes, though probably the worst was after not feeding his army the night before the battle, instead of giving them the traditional rum, he gave them all molasses. Now, if you got an empty stomach, you know what that does to having a stomach full of molasses instead of rum. So they mostly had upset stomachs for the battle. The battle didn't go well. The Patriots were pretty much wiped out. And as a matter of fact, some of the British maimed and bayoneted the people that had already surrendered. So that was called Beaufort's quarter, or no quarter it was. So all of the Patriots were very mad, but we've just had two entire armies in the South wiped out by the British. So the people in North and South Carolina are saying, this is not good. Maybe we ought to go over and sign up with the British so they won't burn our farm. So Patrick Ferguson coming up had orders to not bother the loyalists, but he was welcome to take the farm and anything on it and burn it if it was a Patriot farm, especially if the man was not there because he was off fighting. And the Patriots they were picking up as loyalists knew who the Patriot, or the loyalists that were joining Ferguson knew who the Patriots are in the area. So that's how they got the food to feed the army as it came north. They just took everything from the Patriots. So the Patriot force, whatever you call it, even the militia, were moving ahead of the British Army coming up. So most of them went over the mountain because there wasn't anything, you couldn't fight them. You didn't have enough people to fight them coming up yet. So most of them went ahead and went over the mountain. There were a lot of small fights and skirmishes as they came up. And as just as a point of remembering, I said the war went 3 years up north and 5 down here. Did you know that North Carolina had 393 battle skirmishes and Revolutionary War incidences? And South Carolina had 409. So there's an awful lot going on in the background in all of this stuff. So it is pretty bad times. The Patriots are not doing well. They're being run out. And Patrick Ferguson is coming up the road through here, this road right out here. And he gets over into North Carolina and he settles down at Gilberttown. Now at that time, in 1780, that was Rutherford County, and that was the county seat. And there was some furniture manufacturing going on there, but it was a very small place. But it was very, very important to the county, which, by the way, went all the way to the Mississippi at that time. But he settled in there, and he heard there are men coming up from Georgia. Well, he wants to catch them. Now, he knows there's a battle coming, but he doesn't know when or where. So he sends some of his men off furloughed. So he didn't have his full complement of forces. And he's sending people out scouting to try to get the people coming in from Georgia. There were some battles in Georgia, and some troops were coming up here to join the Patriots. So he's getting frustrated because he can't catch the Patriots. And there are some people coming in and signing a loyalty pledge, but that's mainly just so that they don't get their farm burned and their crops all taken and their cattle and horses taken. So he's not doing too well there. He catches a young man who is the cousin of one of the over-the-mountain colonels. Every county had a militia with a colonel and major and captain and all that. Well, we had a lot of colonels. We had a lot of militia units. And this young man was a cousin of one of the colonels over the mountain. So he sent him over there with a message. And the message was, if you men don't come over here, swear allegiance to the king, and join my army to put down the rebellion, I'm going to come over there with my army, and with fire and sword, I'm going to destitute your women and children, and I'm going to lay waste to your country, and I'm going to hang your leaders. Well, you know, you get a bunch of Scotch-Irish people, and you threaten them like that. And these tough frontiersmen out here in this area, and it didn't get the result he wanted. They didn't come over here begging for mercy like he thought they would. He had a very low opinion of the average patriot, and he actually thought people were going to come over and sort of beg forgiveness, sign up, and help him put down the rebellion. And that wasn't quite what happened. So the men all gathered up more troops. They went up into Kentucky, brought down troops from Kentucky. They had plenty of troops around the Holston and Nolichucky rivers at Sycamore Shoals. And they had all the troops from Burke County and Rutherford County, North Carolina, that had gone over the mountain to avoid Ferguson. So they went to Virginia and said, we need more men. Well, Virginia said, hey, I'd love to help you, but I've got a whole army sitting out here on the coast that's getting ready to come over here and crush us. So I've got to stay here and protect the interest of Western Virginia. And the colonels were pretty smart, and they said, well, if Ferguson comes up here and crushes us, then he's going to come on up there anyway, and now you're going to have an army of the British on your coast and another one in your mountains, and you can't survive. And they saw yeah, this is right. So they gave 400 men to the cause. So at Sycamore Shoals, there's pretty large number of people gathering to come over and fight this thing. Now, they had a woman there who had a powder mill. Now, powder is really, really rare. Most farms didn't have a whole pound of powder. Now, Mary Patton made the best powder anywhere around. Fast burning, clean burning, very, very good, reliable powder. And she knew that if all these men going to chase down Ferguson were unsuccessful, he's going to come over here and lay waste anyway, and she's going to lose the powder mill and everything. So she gave the men 500 pounds of the finest powder that was out there. Now, a pound of powder is 100 shots. 70 grains goes into 7,000, a nice 100 times. So if a pound of powder is 100 shots, you know, what's 500 pounds? So she really gave them enough powder to win a major battle once or twice. And she put them in casks that are lead lined so they won't have a spark and they will stay dry. So this was very important. They had the supplies now. They had a whole bunch of cattle to take on the trip. They're all gathering everybody in the at Sycamore Shoals and deciding who's going to stay and protect the settlement and who's going to go. Well, everybody wanted to go chase Ferguson because he threatened them. But they picked the people that would stay and the people that would go. And they had a minister there who was pretty darn good. And they needed a story told and a cheerleading, rousing story to get them on the way. So I want to introduce you to the Reverend Doak.
Good evening. I am Samuel Doak, Presbyterian minister. And when these good Scotch-Irish folks came over the mountains, they felt the need to be ministered to, and they sent word up into the diocese in Virginia, and I was called to come down and minister to them. Now, when this threat came across the mountain, I felt the need to be with them, at least to get them started on this trip. And when these men came to Sycamore Shoals, there's more than 1,000 men there. Most of them had their wives and their children with them. So we're talking about a huge number of people. For most people, if you'd ever seen 10 people at the same time, you had 8 brothers and sisters and mom and dad. You just didn't see that many people together. So the evening before they were to depart, I walked around among the campfires and talked to the men and their families, listened to the things that they were saying, and I felt called to find something to say to send them off on this very dangerous mission. And so I stayed up late into the night and wrote this. My countrymen, you're about to set out on an expedition which is full of hardships and dangers, but one in which the Almighty will attend you. The mother country has her hands upon you, these American colonies, and takes that for which our fathers planted their homes in the wilderness, our liberty. Taxation without representation and the quartering of soldiers in the homes of our people without their consent are evidence that the Crown of England would take from its American subjects the last vestige of freedom. Your brethren across the mountains are crying like Macedonia unto your help. God forbid that you shall refuse to hear and answer their call. But their call is not all. The enemy is marching hither to destroy your homes. Brave men, you are not unacquainted with battle. Your hands have been taught to war and your fingers to fight. You have wrested these beautiful valleys of the Holston and Watauga from the savage hands. Will you tarry now until another enemy carries fire and sword to your very doors?
No!
No, it shall not be. Go forth then in the strength of your manhood, to the aid of your brethren, in the defense of your liberty, the protection of your homes, and may the God of justice be with you and give you victory.
Victory!
Let us pray. Almighty and gracious God, thou hast been the strength and refuge of thy people in all ages. In time of sorest need, we have learned to come to thee, our rock and our fortress. Thou knowest the dangers and snares that surround us on march and battle. Thou knowest the dangers that constantly threaten the humble but well-beloved homes which thy servants have left behind them. In thy infinite mercy, save us from the cruel hand of the savage and of the tyrant. Save the unprotected homes while fathers and husbands and sons are far away fighting for freedom and helping the oppressed. Thou who promised to protect the sparrow in his flight, keep ceaseless watch by day and by night over our loved ones. The helpless women and little children we commit to thy care. Thou wilt not leave them or forsake them in times of loneliness and anxiety and terror. O God of battle, arise in thy might. Avenge the slaughter of thy people. Confound those who plot for our destruction. Crown this mighty effort with victory and smite those who exalt themselves against liberty and justice and truth. Help us as good soldiers to yield the sword of the Lord and Gideon. Amen. Are you fired up, ready to go? Y'all were supposed to jump up out of there yelling amen and let's go get them. Well, they were pretty fired up. One thought is that, help, I'm attacked. One thought was that in deciding who had to stay behind, they lined everybody up and every seventh man was told to step back. You know, everybody wanted to go and end this threat. They wanted to be a part of that. But those men that stayed behind, if Ferguson had gotten behind us, if the Indians had attacked from the other side, somebody needed to be at home to defend our homes and our families that were going to be staying behind. And so it was very important for those persons. So even though they were not at Kings Mountain, their value was just as great as those men who traveled over to Kings Mountain. Now, we had this herd of cattle that we were planning to bring along with us, this, beef on the hoof. And so we were going to bring that cattle with us as we marched so we would have plenty to eat. That's a great idea. Problem is, any of y'all have cows? Yeah, cows aren't very smart. And when you try and tell them where to go, they're not very good at that. And so the cows kept wandering all over the place, and they were slowing us down. And so we got to our first night's stop at a place called the Shelving Rock, near what is Overmountain, Tennessee now. And so there, we slaughtered some of the beef, enough for a day or two for us to eat, and then sent the rest of the cattle back to Sycamore Shoals. Now that evening, it started to rain, and it rained and it rained. Now that place was called the Shelving Rock because there was a rock overhang that made sort of a cave. The Indians used to call them a rock house. And so this would have been a really good place for us to try and get up under and stay out of the rain. Would have been great. Problem is, we had that 500 pounds of powder, and it was far more valuable to keep that dry than to worry about keeping us dry. So we put that powder up underneath and put some guards on that, and the rest of us all lay down out into the rain with maybe a wool blanket to wrap around ourselves. The next morning we get up, it's still raining. It's terrible. And we head out of there up over Yellow Mountain, and when we get to Yellow Mountain Gap, it stopped raining. It started snowing. There was 3 to 4 inches of snow in Yellow Gap. And so we're going to spend another night there in the snow. And this is September the 27th of 1780. This is not late in the winter. This is still early fall. But they get some snow. And so that next morning, we have a roll call. We do some drilling and then we do a roll call. And we find that 2 of our men are missing. Chambers and Crawford. They were both men that were in Severe's militia. And everybody kind of had some suspicions that these guys might have been loyalists. They might have been for the king and not for us. And so the fact that they disappeared and didn't say anything to anybody made it pretty clear to us that that was the case. And now we know that Ferguson may get to find out that we're on our way. And one of the most important things we had going for us was surprise, because he didn't know there was this big army heading for him. Well, there was a discussion about whether or not we should even turn around and go home. But we decided, after all those years of fighting Indians, that a defensive battle is not very effective. You're likely to get cut off and run out of supplies. And the best thing to do is to take the battle to somebody else. So we went, we got to go. Even if he knows we're coming, we have to go and be a part and get him. And so on we march. We cross through a place that's now known as Alta Pass. It's on the Blue Ridge Parkway. There's a big apple orchard there. It's a really nice place. But coming down off of there are two, and there is a family of patriots there known as the McDowells. And when we get there, we haven't had anything to eat for a couple of days, and we're a little bit hungry, and we're cold and wet, and it's just not very good. And so the guys say, well, we've hidden some cows back up in the hollers up there. And so they go and get some of those cows and bring them down so that we can slaughter those cattle and have something to eat. And then the lady of the house even comes out and says, listen, take the top rail off our fences and use that for firewood so that you can warm yourselves and maybe dry a little bit and do some cooking. And so this is a real help as we can kind of recharge just a little bit before we have to head out again. But there's something else that happens right here that also charges us up a little bit. There was another group of militia, between 200 and 400 men, that came with a Colonel Winston and a Colonel Cleveland from Surrey and Wilkes County up along the Virginia line. And these men had just come in. They had started just a couple days after we did and met us there at Quaker Meadows. So now our force has grown to more than 1,500 men. We've got a really good fighting force, and we are ready to go and move on.
Colonel McDowell also had some connections and communications with the militias that were located in what is now Rutherford County, North Carolina. Besides the fact that they knew that Gilberttown was in Rutherford County, and that's where Patrick Ferguson had written his letter from, we were all charged up and ready to go with a full belly. And we do. We'd march ourselves down to Gilberttown, and the rain comes back. It's raining and raining and raining. We know we can't fight in the rain, so we wait about a day or so. But then we said, this is now or never. This is our chance. We prime our weapons, we tie our horses back up in the trees, we get in our lines of battle, and we charge through the tree line into this big open field at Gilberttown, and Ferguson's not there. He's left. Now, about this time, we also have some men from South Carolina joining us under James Williams. And Williams says more than likely what has happened is Ferguson has retreated toward Fort 96, southwest, where there's a big British garrison that he can get reinforcements from and get some protection from our growing army. So we take off marching, and after a day or so, we arrive on the banks of the Green River in what is now Columbus, North Carolina, at a place called Alexander's Ford. The problem is, after marching in the rain, we've lost his trail. We don't know where Ferguson's going. We don't even know if we're following his trail. And we're starting to get discouraged because it's been a couple of days since we ate that good meal at McDowell's. We're sitting there in camp. Our colonels are having a discussion on whether we're going to actually continue our way to 96, or do we cut and run and go home and protect our families that we left 2 weeks ago? Well, about that time in the middle of the night, here comes a single horseback rider into the middle of our camp yelling that he needs to talk to Colonel Severe. Now, some of the men are grouchy. They pick up their rifles and take aim. They want to shoot him out of the saddle. And there are some that said, this is a spy, and the way you treat a spy is to hang him. We need to hang this guy. All the time he's yelling, "I know Sevier, take me to Sevier." Well, that's what they do. They grab him off the horse, and take him to John Sevier, and Sevier says, "Yes, I know this man. He's Colonel Edward Lacey of the South Carolina militia. We need to hear what he has to say. Maybe he has some information for us." And Lacey says, "Well, where are y'all headed?" And the colonels say, "We're going to 96 to catch Ferguson." Lacey says, "Y'all are headed in the wrong direction." Ferguson went east. He's trying to get to Charlottetown, where Cornwallis and his armies hold up. And he says, "By the way, I've got a bunch of men, and I can get others, and we can all meet at the Cowpens." Y'all know where the Cowpens is. Many of you have hunted there. So many of you have bought cattle there. Some of you have even sold cattle there. So the next morning, we get on horse. Lacey's already gone off to gather what men he can. And we take off for the Cowpens. On October the 6th, in the evening, we're riding into the Cowpens. Now, the good news for us is, not only is this a well-known meeting place, not only are there hundreds of more men here going to help us, but there's cattle in the Cowpens. We can get ourselves a little bite to eat, maybe warm ourselves up from all this rain we've been marching through. The colonels know at this point that Ferguson's off somewhere along the Charlotte Pike. Probably, we don't know exactly where, but we have an idea. We can head up the road. What we have to do now is pick the best men that we have with the best horses that we have, and we're going to make a final push to find and fight Ferguson and his men before he can get to Charlotte and Cornwallis. So they take off in the night in another driving rainstorm. And they're marching in that black night. They lose their ways a couple of times. They get sidetracked, have to cross a couple of rivers. But that morning, as they're coming up the road, they see a house. And one young man says, "I can go in that house and I'll find out where Ferguson is." They send him on up. He knocks on the door, and the lady of the house opens the door and says, "Can I help you?" And he goes, "I'm a loyalist. I want to fight with Ferguson. Do you know where he is?" And the other lady in the house says, "I know exactly where he is. I just took him a basket of eggs this morning for his breakfast. He's up on Kings Mountain." About that time, some more of the Patriot Overmountain men come up and said, "We got a spy in our midst. We're going to hang this boy because he's going to warn Ferguson that we're coming." And of course, the ladies are like, "Don't do that. He's just a young boy." And one of the colonels says, "No, what we're going to do, so we don't offend the ladies, we'll take him up the road, go around the corner, and we'll hang him there." So the Overmountain men go on up the road, they get around the corner, and they stop. And the colonels go, "Do you know where Ferguson is?" And the boy says, "Yes, he's on Kings Mountain." So the Patriots ride on. And they get to Kings Mountain about 2 in the afternoon or so. And they're able to spring a surprise. Now, why did they have the element of surprise? All that rain that we have been cursing these 2 weeks that we've been marching through, it's made the roads soft and mushy. These dirt roads didn't give off any clouds of dust to say that a large army was on its way. As we start to surround the mountain in all that brush, the wet leaves do not crackle. The twigs that would normally snap when stepped on bent instead because they were damp. We were almost all the way around that mountain when one of Ferguson's sentries spots one of our men and fires a shot, and the battle is on. In the course of this nearly hour-long battle, we had been told to act as our own captains. Each one of us loads our rifle, fires a shot, and storms up that hill. Ferguson had trained his loyalists well. They maintained a line, they shot their own volley, then they fixed their bayonets and charged down the hill after us. But we couldn't put up with the bayonets, so we went back down the mountain. But they stopped and went back up to the top and formed their line again. So we reloaded, gave another shout, and ran up that mountain firing again. Well, the Loyalists fixed their bayonets, made another shot, and charged after us down the hill. So we took back the other way. But they stopped again and went back up. So we did the same thing again. We reloaded, and this third time we charged up that hill, we made the top. We started fighting hand to hand. Now Ferguson is the only military professional soldier there on the battlefield, but he wasn't wearing a red coat. He's wearing a red and white checkered shirt that was easy to spot. He had a damaged arm that couldn't be used. He had that strapped to his chest, and of all things, he was giving orders with a whistle. If you couldn't see him, you could hear him. Well, we had one of our men raise his rifle and said, "I've got a bead on him." And he raises that rifle, takes dead aim, presses the trigger, and click. It misfires. The guy next to him says, "Well, let me see what I can do." This is Robert Young. He's about 70 years old. He says, "Let me see what my rifle can do. Let me see what Sweet Lips can do." See, he named his rifle after his wife. Her name was Mary, but he called her Sweet Lips. He took aim, touched off that trigger, and Ferguson lifts out of that saddle. Before Ferguson's body hits the ground, 8 more bullets finds him. The battle is basically over. Ferguson has died. The men surrender. It takes some time to get our men under control, I will admit to that. But at the end of the battle, every one of Ferguson's men has been captured or killed. Now we know that Cornwallis is very close, because we had actually on our route in captured 3 of Ferguson's messengers asking for help. We didn't know if there was a 4th or 5th or whatever. So we did the best we could. We dug some pits, very shallow, very quickly, put the dead bodies in those pits, covered it with brush and whatever we could find. Oh, we did find a good place for Ferguson. We put him over here on the side, and we built him a proper Scottish cairn. Pile of rocks on top of him so everybody knew where he was. And we took off with our prisoners, hoping to get back home before something else happened.
The Battle of Kings Mountain has come to an end. The story of Kings Mountain has not. This story continues on. It took about a week to 10 days before Cornwallis found out what happened on Kings Mountain. He had to start rethinking his strategy in the south and figure out how to work it, because it definitely was not going anywhere good for him. He has just lost 1/3 of his army. Now, a place that you folks may know a little bit about, because it's just right over there. January 17, 1781, the Battle of Cowpens happened right here. Very important battle. It was a well-planned and well-executed battle that day where the Patriots won. Tarleton himself almost lost his life that day and had to flee. Now on March 15 at Guilford Courthouse, at Guilford Courthouse, another big battle between the British ensued. Now we give credit to the British winning that battle, but if you look at the statistics of his losses that day, he really lost it. The reason we say the British won that battle is because the rules of war at that time says whoever is left on the battlefield wins. Well, we left him on the battlefield. We moved out because we saw there was no use to continue fighting and lose men. But before we left, before it was over, Cornwallis himself lost 1/3 of the men he had with him. So now he has to start thinking, what am I going to do? His alternative now has come down. I'm going to have to definitely go back north. So he heads to Virginia, a place called Yorktown. 12 months, 12 days after the Battle of Kings Mountain, Cornwallis finds himself totally surrounded at Yorktown, nowhere to go, can't leave by water or anything else, and he surrenders to General George Washington. Now still, the Revolutionary War is not completely over yet, nor is the story of the Kings Mountain. Another couple years before it finally comes to an end, when the Treaty of Paris is signed by the British and the colonists in Paris, France. Now we can say the Revolutionary War is truly over. And also we can now say Kings Mountain story is over. Now I didn't tell you a while ago, but I want to make one point that this battle at Kings Mountain is considered to be the turning point in the Southern strategy of the Revolutionary War. As you could tell from the battles, it made them turn and have to go back north. On that day that the treaty was signed in Paris, a brand new story starts. That is a story that each and every one of you here, each and every one of us, are involved in. Our parents, grandparents, and so far back in the years have all been involved in this story. It's a new country that has come about. This country became what we now call the United States of America. Huzzah! Huzzah!
Go to your fire lock. Hoist your fire lock. With powder only. Prime and move. Hoist your fire lock. Like ready. Take aim.